3 alien girls arrived at his farmhouse for a job, but stayed to steal his heart. The unexpected arrivals. The December wind howled across the frost-covered Wyoming plains like a living thing, rattling the windows of the Mercer family ranch house that had stood for 3 generations. Ethan Mercer stood at those windows, his weathered hands wrapped around a mug of coffee gone cold, staring at the snow-buried fields that stretched toward distant mountains. At 38, he looked older. Grief and exhaustion had carved lines around his blue-gray eyes that hadn't been there 2 years ago, before cancer took Rebecca and left him alone with 500 acres and more cattle than one man could reasonably manage. The ranch was dying slowly, like he was. Fences needed mending, equipment sat broken in the shed, and he'd lost 3 calves last week because he couldn't be everywhere at once. His foreman had quit in November, and no experienced hands wanted to work this far from civilization during winter. Tomorrow he'd have to make calls about selling off the herd, maybe the land too. The thought made him sick. He was heading to bed when the sky lit up. Not lightning, something else entirely. A brilliant cascade of silver and blue light poured from the clouds, concentrating near his equipment shed like a waterfall of luminescence. Ethan's heart hammered as he grabbed his rifle and a heavy coat, boots crunching through snow toward the phenomenon. The light intensified, then collapsed inward with a sound like crystalline bells shattering. Silence. Then movement. 3 figures emerged from behind his shed, and Ethan nearly dropped his weapon. Women, impossibly beautiful women, stepped into his flashlight beam wearing strange form-fitting garments that seemed to shimmer with contained light. The one in front held up empty hands in a gesture of peace, her copper-toned skin catching moonlight, her eyes an unsettling shade of violet that couldn't be natural. "Please don't be alarmed," she said in perfect English, though her accent carried musical notes he'd never heard before. "My name is Vila. We mean no harm. Our vehicle has malfunctioned, and we need shelter while we repair it." Behind her, a woman with dark hair streaked with silver peered at him with curiosity, a faint golden glow emanating from her skin. The third, with honey-toned features and eyes that seemed to shift between blue and green, offered a gentle smile that somehow eased his racing pulse. "Vehicle," Ethan repeated flatly, rifle still raised. "Lady, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but—" "We're travelers," the silver-streaked one interrupted, stepping forward with confident ease. "Long-distance travelers. Our transport failed. We saw your ranch from above. We're experienced with machinery, agriculture, animal husbandry. We'll work for room and board, nothing more. Just until we can make repairs and continue our journey." Ethan studied them, his rancher's instinct for reading people warring with his common sense. They looked exhausted despite their otherworldly appearance, their strange clothes torn in places, one of them, Vila, favoring her left side slightly. And God help him, he was desperate. "You know cattle?" he asked. "We're fast learners," Vila assured him, something earnest in those violet eyes. "Give us 1 week. If we can't pull our weight, we'll leave immediately. But I think you'll find we're more capable than we look." The third woman, who hadn't spoken yet, met his gaze and something passed between them, a warmth, a recognition, like meeting someone you'd known in a half-remembered dream. "We really do need help," she said softly. "And it seems like maybe you do too." Ethan thought of his empty house, his dying ranch, and the impossible loneliness that had been his only companion for 2 years. These women were strange, maybe even dangerous, but something in his gut told him they weren't lying about needing refuge. And if they could actually work. "Bunkhouse is heated," he heard himself say, lowering the rifle. "Bathrooms basic but functional. You work dawn to dusk. If anything goes missing, if you cause trouble, you're gone. Clear." Vila's face transformed with relief and gratitude. "Crystal clear. Thank you, Ethan Mercer. You won't regret this." He wasn't sure about that as he led 3 mysterious strangers through his snow-covered ranch toward the bunkhouse, their strange garments gradually shifting to look like normal winter clothes before his eyes. But as they passed under the porch light and he saw their faces, hopeful, grateful, beautiful in ways that made his chest ache, he thought maybe, just maybe, the universe had finally sent him something other than loss. The December stars watched as Ethan opened the bunkhouse door, unaware that his life had just changed forever. Building connections. The first week proved that Vila hadn't been lying about their capabilities. Ethan woke before dawn as always, expecting to find his new workers still sleeping, but instead discovered all three already in the barn, efficiently handling the morning feed with a coordination that seemed almost telepathic. Vila moved among the cattle with fearless authority, calming a temperamental bull that had gored 2 ranch hands last year with nothing but steady eye contact and a firm voice. Kira, the silver-streaked engineer, had somehow coaxed his ancient tractor back to life, humming while she worked with tools that occasionally glowed in ways his equipment definitely shouldn't. Solara, the quiet healer, worked magic with the animals. 2 calves that had been failing suddenly thrived under her care, and she seemed to know instinctively when something was wrong, appearing at a cow's side minutes before Ethan even noticed the animal's distress. By the second week, the ranch operated smoother than it had in years. But something else was happening too, something that terrified and exhilarated Ethan in equal measure. It started innocently enough. Late one evening, he found Vila in his office, studying his chaotic record-keeping by lamplight. "Your organizational system needs work," she said bluntly, but her smile softened the criticism. "May I help?" They spent hours together reorganizing files, Vila's efficient mind bringing order to years of neglect. But as midnight approached, their conversation drifted from cattle breeding schedules to deeper waters. Her telling him about leading troops through impossible situations, him sharing how he'd watched Rebecca fade away, helpless to save her. "Leadership means carrying weight that crushes you," Vila said quietly, her violet eyes holding his. "But you carried it anyway. That's what makes you strong, Ethan." Her hand covered his on the desk, warm and solid, and for the first time in 2 years, Ethan felt seen. When she leaned closer, her copper skin luminous in the lamplight, his breath caught. She traced his calloused palm with gentle fingers, mapping the lines of his hard work, and the intimacy of that simple touch shook him to his core. "Vila," he whispered, but didn't pull away. "I know," she murmured. "I feel it too." With Kira, it was different, fire instead of steady warmth. She'd commandeered his workshop, and Ethan found himself drawn there under the pretense of checking her progress. She worked with infectious enthusiasm, explaining modifications in technical terms he barely understood, her golden luminescence brightening when excited. Their accidental touches during repairs, his hand steadying hers, her fingers brushing his while passing tools, created sparks that had nothing to do with welding. One afternoon, she succeeded in resurrecting his broken hay baler, whooping with triumph and throwing herself into his arms without thinking. They froze, bodies pressed together, her face inches from his. Her playful demeanor shifted to something raw and hungry. "Ethan," she breathed, and the way she said his name made his heart race. "This is complicated," he managed, even as his hands settled on her waist. "The best things always are," she replied, her smile wicked and vulnerable at once. She didn't kiss him, not yet, but the promise hung between them like summer lightning. Solara's connection grew through quiet moments. She'd find him in the fields at sunset, walking beside him in companionable silence, occasionally sharing observations about the land that revealed an alien perspective on familiar beauty. One evening by the creek, she recited poetry from her world, words in her own language that sounded like wind chimes and water flowing, then translated into English verses about light finding light across impossible darkness. "That's beautiful," Ethan said, sitting beside her on the frozen bank. "It's about soul bonding," Solara explained, her color-shifting eyes reflecting the twilight. "My people believe that hearts recognize each other across any distance, any difference. That love isn't limited by convention or expectation." She looked at him then with such open tenderness that Ethan felt his careful walls crumbling. When she reached up to touch his face, her palm warm against his cold-chapped cheek, he leaned into the contact like a man starving for gentleness. "You've been alone too long," she whispered. "I can feel the ache in you. You don't have to carry it by yourself anymore." His eyes stung with unexpected tears. "I don't understand what's happening. With you three. With me." "Love rarely makes sense," Solara said simply. "But it's real whether we understand it or not." By the third week, Ethan lay awake at night, tormented by impossible feelings. He was falling for all three of them, Vila's strength, Kira's passion, Solara's compassion, each connection distinct but equally powerful. It was madness. It was wrong. It was the most alive he'd felt since Rebecca died. In the bunkhouse, the three Celestran women faced their own reckoning. "We need to tell him," Solara insisted. "About us. About everything." "He's not ready," Vila countered, though her heart wasn't in the argument. "He barely accepts his feelings for one of us, much less all three," Kira finished, her usual humor absent. "But I can't keep pretending. Every time he looks at me, I want to show him everything, who we are, where we're from, what we could offer him." They fell silent, bound by shared longing for a human who'd given them more than shelter. He'd given them a glimpse of what home could feel like, and none of them wanted to let it go. Hearts revealed. Spring arrived like a whispered promise, melting the Wyoming snow into rushing creeks and transforming brown earth into green possibility. The ranch bloomed under their combined efforts, Ethan's lifetime of knowledge meeting the otherworldly capabilities of his three mysterious workers. But the warming weather brought complications beyond thawing ground. The tension between them had become unbearable, thick as summer honey and twice as sweet. Ethan caught himself watching Vila during morning rounds, admiring how sunrise caught her copper skin and made her violet eyes luminous. He invented reasons to visit Kira's workshop, addicted to her laughter and the way she bit her lower lip when concentrating. He sought out Solara's company in the evening, craving the peace she brought to his restless soul. The women felt it too. Ethan would turn and find one of them watching him with barely concealed longing, desire, and uncertainty warring in her expression. The accidental touches lingered longer. Conversations stretched into charged silences heavy with unspoken confessions. Everything changed on a bright April morning when Thunder, his most volatile stallion, spooked during feeding. Ethan saw it happening in slow motion, the massive horse rearing, iron-shod hooves descending toward his skull. He couldn't move fast enough. But Vila could. She crossed 15 feet in a heartbeat, moving with impossible speed, her hand catching Thunder's bridle and redirecting 1,200 pounds of panicked horseflesh with casual strength. The stallion settled immediately under her touch, trembling but calm. Ethan stared at her, his heart hammering from near death and something else entirely. "How did you?" he started. "Ethan," Vila interrupted, breathing hard, her disguise flickering momentarily to reveal subtle patterns of light beneath her skin. "We need to talk. All of us. No more secrets." They gathered in his living room that evening, the four of them, tension crackling like electricity before a storm. Ethan sat while the three women stood before him, holding hands in a gesture of unified courage. "We're not from Wyoming," Kira began, attempting levity that fell flat. "Not from anywhere on Earth, actually." Solara stepped forward, her eyes shifting through their rainbow of colors. "We're from a planet called Celestara, many light-years from here. Our exploration vessel crashed near your ranch. We've been repairing it while hiding in your canyon." Ethan should have laughed, should have thrown them out for such an absurd story. But he thought of Vila's impossible speed, Kira's miraculous repairs, Solara's healing touch, the way they sometimes glowed in darkness. He thought of 1,000 small impossibilities he'd witnessed and rationalized away. "Show me," he said quietly, "your true selves." As one, they deactivated their adaptive disguises. The changes were subtle but undeniable, the glow beneath their skin intensified, patterns of light tracing along their arms like living constellations, their eyes brightening to inhuman radiance. They were still themselves, still the women he'd come to know, but now revealed as something more. "Are you afraid?" Vila asked, vulnerability cracking her warrior's composure. Ethan stood, closing the distance between them. "Terrified," he admitted. "But not of what you are." He looked at each of them in turn. "I'm afraid of what I feel. For all of you. It's impossible. It's how we feel too," Solara interrupted softly. "All three of us. For you." "In Celestran culture," Vila explained, her voice steady despite trembling hands, "love isn't limited by numbers or convention. We form bonds, deep, committed partnerships, with those our hearts choose, whether that's one person or several. It's not about division but multiplication. Not less love spread thin, but more love creating something stronger." "We didn't plan this," Kira added, her usual confidence wavering. "We came here broken and desperate, expecting to hide and leave. But you gave us sanctuary. You saw us as people, not strangers to fear. And somewhere between fixing tractors and delivering calves and watching you work yourself to exhaustion for this land, we fell in love with your heart. Ethan's mind reeled, yet his heart beat with crystalline certainty. I don't know how this works. I don't understand the logistics or the morality or anything beyond the fact that when I'm with any of you, I feel like myself again. Like I'm not just surviving but actually living. He reached for Vila first, cupping her face with work-roughened hands. You make me feel strong enough to carry anything. Then Kira, tucking silver-streaked hair behind her ear. You make me remember how to laugh. Finally Solara, tracing the line of her jaw with gentle reverence. You make me believe in softness again. And together, he finished, looking at all three, you make me believe in everything. Vila moved first, closing the final distance and pressing her lips to his with warrior's courage and woman's tenderness. The kiss spoke of battles fought and walls breached, of finding shelter in unexpected places. When they parted, Ethan turned to find Kira watching with molten eyes. My turn, she declared, pulling him down with playful possessiveness that melted into genuine passion. Her kiss tasted like lightning and laughter, full of clever hands and whispered promises that made him dizzy. Solara waited with patient certainty, and when he finally reached her, she welcomed him like coming home. Her kiss was gentle and deep, healing old wounds while kindling new fires, her empathic nature letting her feel what he needed and giving it without reservation. They ended tangled together on his couch, a knot of 4 beating hearts learning how to synchronize. Vila's head on his shoulder, Kira curled against his side, Solara's fingers laced with his, all of them breathing in unison. Our ship will be repaired soon, Vila said eventually, breaking the peaceful silence. Within days. We'll have to return to Celestara. Our people need us for the war effort. Ethan's contentment shattered. War. Our world faces threats, she explained. My military expertise is crucial. Kira's engineering innovations are needed for defense systems. Solara's healing abilities could save thousands. So you leave, Ethan said flatly, old grief rushing back. Or, Solara ventured carefully, you could come with us. The words hung in the air like a fragile spell. Leave Earth. Leave everything he'd ever known. Step into impossible stars with 3 alien women who'd stolen his heart. Think about it, Vila urged. We're not asking for an answer tonight. Just consider that love might be asking you to choose adventure over security, possibility over certainty. As they reluctantly separated for the night, Ethan stood at his window again, watching stars that suddenly seemed less distant. Somewhere up there was a world where his heart could belong to 3 people without shame, where love multiplied instead of divided. The question was whether he possessed the courage to reach for it. The choice. The next 3 days passed in agonizing limbo. Ethan threw himself into ranch work, trying to silence the impossible decision screaming in his mind. Leave Earth. Abandon the land his grandfather had homesteaded, that his father had expanded, that he and Rebecca had dreamed of passing to children they'd never had? It was insanity. Yet every time he looked at Vila commanding the morning operations with natural authority, at Kira humming while she revolutionized his irrigation system, at Solara coaxing new life from his garden with touches that seemed to convince plants to thrive, every time he saw them, the decision felt less impossible and more inevitable. They didn't pressure him. Instead, they loved him with breathtaking openness. Vila would find him in the stables at midnight, sitting beside him in companionable silence before sharing stories of Celestran cities that floated among clouds. Kira pulled him into her workshop to show him holographic star maps, her enthusiasm infectious as she pointed out nebulas and asteroid fields they could explore together. Solara walked the property with him at sunset, helping him memorize every detail, the specific blue of Wyoming sky, the smell of sage after rain, the feel of this earth that had shaped him. I'm not trying to make you forget, she assured him. Just making sure you carry it with you, wherever you go. On the 3rd evening, his cousin Marcus arrived unexpectedly, driving up the long road in his pickup. Marcus managed to spread 2 counties over and had been after Ethan for months to consider selling, to stop killing himself trying to run this place alone. Came to check on you, Marcus said, accepting a beer on the porch. Heard you hired some help. Figured I'd see if you'd finally come to your senses about this place. They talked ranch business while the women discreetly stayed in the bunkhouse, but Marcus wasn't fooled. Those your new workers? They're something else. Where'd you find them? They found me, Ethan said truthfully. And yeah, there's something else. Marcus studied him with the knowing eyes of someone who'd watched Ethan grieve for 2 years. You look different. Lighter, maybe. Like you finally stopped carrying the whole world. They've helped, Ethan admitted quietly. Good. You deserved some help. Marcus paused, choosing his words carefully. You know, if you ever wanted to do something different, travel, start over somewhere new, I'd take this place off your hands. Keep it in the family, run it right. You wouldn't have to worry. Ethan stared at his cousin, feeling the universe align. You serious? Always told you I loved this land almost as much as you do. Difference is, I'm not chained to it by ghosts. Marcus softened the harsh words with a gentle smile. Rebecca wouldn't want you buried here with her, Ethan. She'd want you living, wherever that takes you. After Marcus left, Ethan sat on the porch until the women emerged, sensing his need. He told them about the conversation, about the sudden appearance of a solution he hadn't dared imagine. Marcus would care for this place, he said slowly, testing the words. It wouldn't be abandoned. It would be loved. But could you let it go? Vila asked, sitting beside him. Ethan looked at the land bathed in starlight, every fence post and field corner mapped in his memory. Then he looked at the 3 women who'd brought him back to life, who offered not just romance but genuine partnership, not just escape but belonging. I thought this place was my whole world, he said. But maybe it was just preparing me for a bigger one. Before they could respond, headlights appeared on the road, multiple vehicles approaching fast. Ethan tensed as 3 trucks roared into his yard, disgorging 8 men he recognized from the neighboring Blackwood ranch. Dale Blackwood, the owner, had been trying to buy Ethan's water rights for years, growing increasingly aggressive with each refusal. Evening, Mercer, Dale called, his smile predatory. Heard you're hiring pretty girls now instead of real ranch hands. Must be getting desperate. It's late, Blackwood. State your business or leave. Business is simple. You're going to sell me those water rights, or we're going to have a problem. Dale's men spread out, hands hovering near weapons. Found out your hired help ain't exactly documented, if you know what I mean. Hate to call ICE, but if you're harboring illegals. Ethan's hands clenched. You need to leave. Now. Make us, Dale laughed. You're 1 man against 8. Do the math. What happened next unfolded in seconds. Dale's men moved forward aggressively. Vila stepped from the bunkhouse doorway, her disguise dropping as she moved with combat-trained precision, disarming the nearest man before he could draw his weapon. Kira's hands blazed with controlled energy, shorting out the truck's electrical systems with a gesture. Solara's eyes flared bright, and several of the men simply stopped, frozen by something between hypnosis and paralysis. Dale and his crew stood slack-jawed as 3 glowing alien women positioned themselves protectively around Ethan, radiating power that made the air crackle. Gentlemen, Vila said, her voice carrying military command that transcended species. You're going to return to your vehicles, which my colleague will kindly restart, and leave. You'll forget this encounter, forget what you saw, and you will never threaten this man again. Are we clear? They ran. Literally scrambled into their trucks and fled, tires throwing gravel. The silence they left behind felt profound. Ethan turned to his alien protectors, adrenaline and love and certainty flooding through him. That was incredible. You were incredible. That was us holding back, Kira said with a shaky laugh. Imagine what we could do with you beside us in the real universe. Ethan pulled all 3 into his arms, holding them tight under the Wyoming stars. I don't need to imagine anymore. The answer is yes. Yes to leaving. Yes to Celestara. Yes to whatever life we can build together. Vila pulled back to search his face. You're certain? Once we go, Earth becomes. Home is people, not places, Ethan interrupted, finally understanding what his heart had been trying to tell him for weeks. I lost that once. I won't lose it again by being too afraid to choose it. They kissed him then, all three, celebration and promise and joy mingled with relieved tears. Tomorrow he'd call Marcus. Tomorrow he'd start arrangements. But tonight, he held his future in his arms and felt the universe expand with possibility. Journey to forever. The next week blurred past in a whirlwind of preparation. Marcus arrived with contracts and genuine happiness for his cousin, asking no questions about Ethan's mysterious new life, just promising to honor the land they both loved. Ethan sold or donated most of his possessions, keeping only photographs and Rebecca's wedding ring, not as chains to the past, but as honored memories he could carry forward. The women showed him their ship, hidden in the canyon, a vessel of flowing silver lines and crystalline panels that hummed with barely contained power. Kira walked him through basic safety systems while Vila outlined what awaited on Celestara, a world of floating cities and bioluminescent forests, where his skills as a rancher would translate to managing vast agricultural platforms that fed millions. You'll have purpose, Vila assured him. We're not asking you to give up who you are, just to become who you are in a larger context. What about us? Ethan asked quietly, the four of them sitting in the ship's meditation chamber, a space designed for the very conversation they needed. How does this work on your world? Solara took his hand gently. We'll formally bond. A ceremony that intertwines our life forces, recognized by our society as permanent and sacred. You'll be our partner in every way, legally, socially, spiritually. Celestran bonding groups usually range from 2 to 5 individuals, Kira explained, her scientific mind needing to provide context. Ours will be 4. Not unusual, not scandalous. Just us. And physically. Ethan felt heat rise in his face, but he needed to understand. I'm one human with 3. We share, Vila said simply, amusement and affection warming her voice. Sometimes together, sometimes in pairs, sometimes individually. There's no jealousy in our culture around intimacy, only trust and communication. We'll figure out what works for us, for our unique constellation. The night before departure, they held a private ceremony under the stars. Ethan wore his best shirt, the women dressed in flowing Celestran ceremonial garments that shifted colors with their emotions. Solara, as their designated healer priest, spoke words in her native tongue, musical syllables that seemed to resonate in Ethan's chest. She bound their hands with threads of light, literally woven from their combined bioenergy, while Vila recited vows of protection, Kira promises of joy, and Solara pledges of eternal compassion. When Ethan's turn came, he spoke from his battered, healing heart. I vow to grow with you, to learn your worlds while sharing mine. I promise to love each of you as individuals and all of you as my family. I pledge my strength to your causes, my laughter to your days, and my faith to our future. Wherever you lead, I'll follow. Wherever I stumble, I trust you'll catch me. We're bound now, human and Celestran, earth and stars, for hearts beating as one. The light threads flared brilliant and then dissolved, sinking into their skin as permanent marks, subtle constellations on each of their wrists that would glow softly whenever the four were together, visible proof of their bond. That night, they made love for the first time as bonded partners. In the ship's private quarters, Ethan discovered what it meant to be cherished by 3 people simultaneously. Vila's passionate intensity, Kira's playful exploration, Solara's intuitive tenderness, they wove together into something transcendent. He learned their bodies' subtle differences, how Vila liked to lead while Kira delighted in surprise, how Solara could sense exactly what he needed before he knew himself. They learned him too, mapping his scars and calluses with reverent touches, finding the places that made him gasp, teaching him that pleasure could be both multiplied and deeply personal. They fell asleep tangled together, for bodies fitting like puzzle pieces, and Ethan felt complete in ways he'd forgotten were possible. Dawn brought their final goodbye to Earth. Marcus arrived early, embracing Ethan hard. Don't know where you're going, cousin, but you look like a man who found what he was searching for. Rebecca would approve. The ship lifted silently at noon, rising through clouds into stratosphere. Ethan stood at the viewport, watching Wyoming shrink beneath them, the ranch becoming a toy, the mountains flattening, the curve of Earth emerging. His chest ached with bittersweet farewell, but 3 hands found his, anchoring him. Last chance to change your mind, Vila murmured, though she was smiling. Not a chance, Ethan replied, pulling them close. You're stuck with me now. As Earth became a blue marble and stars filled the viewport with impossible clarity, Kira activated the jump drive. Reality twisted, and they plunged into the cosmic ocean between worlds. Ethan's first view of deep space, swirling nebulas and distant galaxies, colors that had no names in English, stole his breath. 3 weeks later, Celestara appeared ahead, a world of impossible beauty, 3 moons orbiting a planet wrapped in bioluminescent clouds. As they descended toward a floating city of crystal and living light, Ethan felt no fear, only wonder. They landed to a waiting crowd, Vila's military unit, Kira's engineering team, Solara's healing circle, all eager to meet the human who'd captured their heroes' hearts. Ethan stepped onto alien soil for the first time, his bonded partners flanking him with proud smiles, and felt 1,000 eyes assessing this strange addition to their world. An elderly Celestran woman approached, her skin marked with the light patterns of great age and wisdom. The human rancher who stole 3 hearts, she said in accented English, eyes twinkling. Welcome to Celestara, Ethan Mercer. May your roots grow deep in our soil, even as your heart remains vast as your sky. Thank you, Ethan managed, throat tight with emotion. I'll do my best to earn that welcome. You already have, she replied, gesturing to his 3 partners. Love is the universal language, and you speak it fluently. The celebration that followed introduced Ethan to wonders beyond imagination. Food that glowed and sang on the tongue, music that painted the air with visible harmonics, dances that defied gravity. But the greatest wonder was the acceptance, the genuine warmth with which the Celestrans embraced him as one of their own. That night, in their new home, a dwelling carved from living crystal overlooking a forest of trees that produced light instead of leaves, the 4 of them stood on their balcony watching Celestara's 3 moons rise. Any regrets? Solara asked softly. Ethan pulled all 3 close, his constellation-marked wrist glowing softly against their skin. Not a single one. I came to your world, but you gave me a universe. That's a fair trade. We're just getting started, Kira promised with characteristic enthusiasm. Wait until you see the floating mountains, or the singing caves, or we could just be here now, Vila interrupted gently. Together. That's universe enough for tonight. And it was. As Celestara's alien stars wheeled overhead and strange winds carried unfamiliar perfumes, Ethan understood that home had never been a place. It was these 3 heartbeats beside his own, this love that had found him in his darkest winter and carried him to eternal spring. The ranch was behind him, but everything that mattered journeyed forward. They went inside together, closing the door on their first day of forever.